don't get caught up in comparing yourself to other artists. There will always be somebody who's better than you at art. Comparison is a thief of joy.
This is the Bold Artist Podcast.
You have answers and you're expressing them in your art. Your art is important and it needs to be seen.
Welcome, and let's get started with today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Bold Artist Podcast. We're so happy to have you here, whether you're listening on audio or watching on YouTube on the Bold School channel. Welcome to the show. Today we have guest artist Steven Walden of St. Louis, Missouri. Steven is a bold color painter of sports and pop culture. His work has raised just under $500,000 for charity at the time of this interview, and that's quite remarkable. Steven's going to tell us the story of how his paintings have raised money for charity, but more than that, we're going to get to know Steven's heart and how he's a man of great empathy, caring so much for other people, and how he found the purpose of his life through helping other people through his artwork. And Steven's also going to share with us how resistance is sometimes a clue to our insecurities and our fears of failure, and how we can push through those obstacles and reach new levels in our life as an artist. Let's go right on over and get to know Steven Walden. Steven, welcome to the show. So glad you're here. Could we start out by hearing a little bit more about you and your artwork?
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me here. I've been looking forward to it ever since you sent an email a couple of months ago. I am an artist who is based in St. Louis. I am an accidental artist in that I didn't know that I could paint until about 5 years ago or so, and so stumbled into it by accident from pursuing another career. But since I've been doing that, I've helped raise money for charities around the country. I'm right under $500,000 at different charity events across the country, and I specialize in sports and pop culture and portraiture. I paint architecture and buildings, but I hate it. And I've always used color in my palette, bold color, and I've even used that word before I even discovered Charla last year in her courses. It was just a natural fit when I did discover the course last year.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Well, wow, that is excellent glimpse into your life. There's so much that I just want to ask right from that little introduction there. So let's start first by you telling us a little bit about this charity work. This really intrigued me. So tell me about that, Steven. What do you do for charity, and how do your paintings connect into that?
Yeah, so I have to probably tell a little bit about my story, and that I was when I discovered that I could do art, I was pursuing my master's to be a therapist. And along the way, I took an art therapy class as an elective, and that's when I discovered that I could paint. And my classmate said, "Hey, you're really good at this. You should, put your artwork out there." I'm like, whatever, you guys are just saying this just because you love me. And but I did eventually, and my artwork got accepted into a local show here in St. Louis, and someone saw my work and they said, "Hey, we like your work, you should be in this other show." And it just started to kind of build from there. And this was also happening around the time when I was getting ready to graduate, and also going through some other major life changes, which we can talk about later. But I started to look at what would it look like if I were to be a professional artist. And I looked at what entry-level people with their masters in professional counseling were making, and I'm like, I think I can do that with my art. I
love that attitude, by the way. I love that attitude.
Well, it's because it's just so sad what entry-level people make with their masters in mental health. But I threw my hat over the wall, and I decided that, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, and it's not going to be just a solitary act, which art often can be, how can I use my work to help other people? That's the whole reason why I quit my other job as a copywriter and a technical writer to become a therapist, is I wanted to help other people. And when I discovered that I could do art, I'm like, oh, this fulfills this creative side of me, but how do I check that box for helping others. And since I live in St. Louis, I thought, well, if I'm going to create something, I want to create something where an audience already exists. And in St. Louis, there are a couple of major passions here. There is the baseball team, the St. Louis Cardinals, and also we have toasted ravioli, which if you've never had it is amazing. It's ravioli, but deep fried, basically. And so
I quickly need to interject that you also learned something new about your St. Louis today.
Yes.
From me, because I said to you that I thought there was a pretty famous chess sculpture in St. Louis, and you didn't know that.
I didn't know. So. Yeah, largest chess piece. It's somewhere here in St. Louis, so it's a wonder I haven't seen it.
So you can add that to the ravioli and the baseball
There it
list.
is. There it is. Who knows? Maybe I'll do it eventually.
Yes.
So in looking at what a art career would look like and how I could help other people, if and also if I was going to go down the route of doing sports art, I thought, well, what if I started to join up with athletes who are humanitarians? And I started to, and St. Louis has been fortunate enough to have some really wonderful ones, specifically a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, Adam Wainwright, and our the Hall of Fame NFL quarterback, Kurt Warner, used to play for the Rams, now plays for the Arizona Cardinals, and Ozzie Smith, also another baseball player, and doing events with the Blues, our hockey team as well. And regardless, way led on to way in that I reached out to Adam and I said, hey, I know you've got this charity. I would love to do a piece for you. I could paint it live at your event, and then we could auction it off to help raise funds for your event. And he said, absolutely. He tweeted me out. There's a whole story that goes along with that. My phone blew up, and it put me on a fast track and opened a lot of doors in other ways, like with Kurt and with Ozzy and with a number of other charities and other sports franchises as well. And so it was, it really was a kind of butterfly effect of, it flapped its wings, and man, that butterfly just took me to places I did not expect to go. But it's the hardest job I've ever had. It's the hardest I've ever had to work, but it's the most rewarding and the best job I've ever had.
Wow. And so how did you discover the bold color painting and even bold school you mentioned?
Yeah, so like I said, I had decided that when I first started painting, I wanted to use I wanted my style to be distinctive, and that I knew enough about sports artwork that was out there, and a lot of it is very it's very naturalistic, it's very realistic. There's not a lot of the artist that's interjected into the piece itself, because that sells. It's not hard to understand. There's no risk that's involved, and I don't mean to denigrate that, but it's easy. But I also knew enough from my background as a copywriter that I wanted my artwork to be recognizable from 20 feet and someone to be able to recognize it within 3 seconds. And I love Leroy Neiman, who I know he gets a lot of crap, but I loved him. I come from a comics background, and because I'm a nerd, and loving bright colors, Jack Kirby, Alex Ross, loving that style and just garish colors. I thought, what if I applied this to sports? It would be a unique way to make my own imprint in the region. And it did. Okay, so that was in 2015-ish. And as time went on, I felt like that my artwork had plateaued, in the sense that it felt a little samey, and I wasn't sure how to challenge myself. Oh, the other thing is that I'm all self-taught. I have never had a class before, outside of I had to take some classes in high school where I drew, and I did like drawing for a time, and then I began to hate it in high school. And then I had to take a mandatory art appreciation an art class in college, and I absolutely hated it. And I think I even made a C in it, so which is so funny to think about it now. But I saw another artist friend of mine, Tim Kent Moore. He posted on Facebook, this was early 2020, that he had done a colorful pet portrait, and from Charlotte's class. And Tim's also an established artist, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I think it was a pug. It was a pug puppy.
Okay.
And it was fantastic. I'm like, this is it. This is like, it felt like a doorway to figuring out how can I take someone who I get, or who gets me, and is similar in my work, but also different in that I could tell that it was at another level, in that I felt like I was, like I said, plateau, I was coasting. How can I go up? And
Yeah.
the pandemic had just happened, things were locked down, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to have some downtime, so I'm going to commit to this class, and I did, and it's honestly, Mary Chanel, I think it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in taking Charlotte's course, and I'm so grateful for what she puts out there, and just the tone that she approaches her work and her students and her audience, and I'm just I know that I'm also living my best life when I'm at my most grateful, and I would be remiss to not mention that. So thank you, Charla.
For those of you listening and watching and aren't quite sure which class Steven's referring to, I'm sure it's the Bold Color Boot Camp at Bold School. Yes. That really made a radical change there and helped you to level up. I love how you described it as sometimes we hit that plateau in our artistry, and we just need that person even one step or a few steps ahead to just pull us up to the next level and help us make a breakthrough artistically.
So it's a funny story in that it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, and I had all of my work displayed for an exhibit, and it was a huge show. And I had probably about 20, 25 pieces where you could see them all together. And that's not something that I don't think that a lot of artists do. For me, it's that I paint a piece and then I put it away. It's on to the next one. I don't have that much room to display all my stuff, nor do I display all my stuff. To me, it feels like I would be hanging pictures of myself around my house. But someone who knew me very well, they looked at my work and they said, it just all looks a little samey, and that pissed me off in that, and I got really not to him personally, but I was stewing about it, which that's how I process criticism, right? Is I got to get really pissed off and I got to go sulk about it, and then okay, I go eat my chocolate cake, and then that helps me absorb the emotion, and then the more that I thought about it, I'm like, he's right. He's absolutely right. I think often, the things that make us angry are things that are true. And and we also lie best when we lie to ourselves, because I was thinking, no, I'm fine. They are different enough. Or it's like it was intentional because you could see it was a branding. It was it's part of my look, and I'm like, well, was it, or was it that I had gotten comfortable and that's how my pieces started to look?
Right.
And also I didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone to show me how to do differently, because again, like I said, I don't have any training, so I was like reverse engineering, retrofitting, or not even at that point. It was just I didn't know where to go. So, and that was probably a couple of years before I discovered Bold School. And then when I did, it was just, it was Neo from the Matrix. I started to see the code, of everything that existed behind of what makes some artwork work, and what it was so frustrating to me, and why I would look at a piece when I would be done with it. I'm like, man, why is this piece not as good as the other one? It gave me a vocabulary to talk about, and a roadmap to talk about not only what was wrong with those, or how I could critique my previous work, but how could I apply that to my future work. And where before I felt like that everything that I would create, I was in a rut, and that it was very samey, very similar. I'm like, okay, it's on to the next one, almost like production line, to that now I look forward to the next piece, because I'm going to be surprised by it, in that I don't know where it's going to lead, and a lot of that is with color palette and not knowing what doors are going to unfold, because I've gotten a lot formulaic with my work. And this is, we're talking to an audience that's interested in art and like the nuts and bolts of this. This is like not stuff that I talk about to with public facing. They'll look like, oh, your stuff is great and whatever,
right.
which it feels good, but that doesn't help you grow as an artist. So I'm showing you how the sausage is made, right? And and that being able to apply that to my upcoming works, and I can always see when I finish something, I'm like, okay, I like this and this about it, but man, I could have done this differently. And also, it's that being able to let a piece go and not continue to mess with it, because that's just going to take away time for me moving on to the next one. And that work is so busy right now that I don't have a lot of time to do that. You know, it's like, it's like hustle, move on to the next one, which is because, I mean, we're recording this in late 2021. And a lot of things have opened up again. And to me, the last 3 months have been like 2020 and 2021. The first half of it have been they've tried to cram themselves into the last 3 months, and it has been exhausting. I've been the busiest I've ever been. And again, the hardest I've ever worked. And so now it's like I'm taking I'm pumping the brakes a little bit and reminding myself to do that, because that's also a struggle, is that work-life balance. When you work from home, when your studio is in your home, to have that balance. And if you work from home, then you're always at work. I mean, it's great for the commute, but in terms of, the mental health break, it's not as much.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that too, because I work from home as well. So, Steven, you mentioned having this same look on your work for so long, and someone mentioning it just like stirring up all these feelings. And so what would have been for you something like a real practical tip or a real practical skill that you learned that began to differentiate your pieces and first level them up, but then also help them to stand apart from each other?
A couple of things stand out. Number one is learning the importance, and importance is too small of a word, but just the foundational impact of understanding values and how important that is to making sure that a piece is going to work or not, and that it is literally like the foundation of a house. If you don't have sound values in your piece, you are, no matter how beautiful the house is, you're building on quicksand. It will not stand. That was a big one. And what I did, I'm such a nerd. I may have to step away and grab my example of what I did. It's such a teacher's.
Okay, the ones on YouTube will appreciate seeing it if you want to grab it and show it.
I'll be right back. But it's a total. It's for my teacher's pets out there, for the nerds who like to do the extra homework. You're going to be very happy about this. I'll be right back. I'll go grab it.
Okay. I can't wait to see what this is. I have no idea what to expect.
It's utterly ridiculous.
And we'll be sure to describe it for our audio listeners as well. Yeah. But YouTube will have a special preview here of whatever it is Steven Walden's going to pull out for us. Yeah. I'm assuming it has something to do with values. We were talking about learning values. Yeah. Okay.
So the first thing is this thing, which is a value finder, the Grayscale value.
I have one of those too. Yes.
Right. Okay. Which is in our school supplies list that we have to get.
So just to describe that for our audio listeners, it's called a grayscale. It has values starting at white to black, and I believe, am I correct, Steven, that white is the number one, yes, and then up to the darker colors being labeled up to 9 or 10.
Right. Yeah. Mine are. It's white, of course, is going to be on this one, this is made by the Pixis Corporation, Pixiss. There's a plug for you. I got mine on Amazon, but it starts at 100% black, and then as it moves down, we got 90, 80, 70, 60, all the way down to 10%. And then, of course, 0 would be white. So what I did is I realized, paints that just come out of the tube, they already have a starting value of where they are. So I thought, well, what if I went through all of my paints and I mapped out to figure out, well, what would be the starting value of for instance, a Liquitex Perol Orange? What would that be? And so what I did is I went through every single paint that I had, and I made a grid of. And this is like stuff that probably, I don't think that it would be this obsessive in art school, but I just went through and I assigned everything a value, and that way I would know where a color existed on this scale.
Yeah, so for the audio listeners, Steven's holding up a chart that he made that has different colors in different values of all. I'm assuming they're his the paints that you have in your studio, that you mapped out all the values on a chart, on a piece of paper.
Yes.
And so it's a reference for you. I love it.
And not only that, but so I also did that to the point that now I have a binder that this is
a book, a whole book. It'll be the Steven Walden color book before you know it.
but yeah, and it became essentially a Bible, and then I took that and I converted that into an Excel spreadsheet and I'm not this guy. I hate spreadsheets, but it's like it just gave me a categorical way to break down and to demystify color. And so it gave me a way to, it changed, just like when I took dance classes and how it changed the way that I heard music and I would hear rhythm and how my body would move to it. Charlotte's class changed the way that I saw color, that I saw the world.
I love that.
There's a drop for you.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, no. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I love the big binder that you've made full of all your colors. And that's definitely, I got the answer that I was looking for. I said, how did you move things from being same? And it sounds like study was a big part of that.
It was.
Where, sometimes we feel like we need to experiment more or push the boundaries of just brush strokes more. But then there's this other element of actually getting down to study, and that study can push our boundaries. That's a pretty remarkable concept, just to push through the boundaries with study. In terms of being bold, it's very clear through your artwork that you use bold colors, and you used that word bold even long before you discovered Bold School. But as far as being bold and making these bold moves and risks, putting yourself out there as an artist, what has that journey looked like for you, Steven?
It is... There's something about embracing rejection, and not in the sense of rejection is ever going to feel good or failure is going to feel good, but to understand that it's part of the process, and you're not a failure when you fail, as long as you, it's so cliche, as long as you get back up. You only have, if you fail 50 times, you only have to succeed once. And in that, it's that knowing the risks that I've taken. I've been rejected tons of times, and as creatives often do, we feel rejection very intensely and very deeply. And I see that in the class and a lot in the boot camp. And when people what I see is, they'll post their color strings and their palettes and like, oh, how does this look? Or they'll post, the supplies they just bought. And I think sometimes, yes, it's because they're genuinely excited and they have this together. But I also know that there's that fear of, oh my God, what if I do this, little Kenyan girl and I totally screw her up, and it's like, well, you're gonna screw up, but embrace that. And that one of my favorite sayings is that sometimes creating, it's like making pancakes. You are going to screw up, but you still get pancakes, and so it's like you're going to screw up, but as long as you're doing it thoughtfully and with intention, and you're paying attention to what is going on, and you are able to reflect on it and say, like, okay, well, what went wrong with this piece, or what made this piece not necessarily as strong as I wanted it to be, or as it was in my mind's eye. As long as you're doing those things and you're open to feedback and changing and revisiting what you've done before, then I think that's your way out of it.
So in all of the bold moves and risks that you've made as an artist, what has been one of your biggest highlights that's happened in your art career?
Doing speed paintings, like David Garibaldi, the performance art, getting in front of a crowd, painting something upside down within a few minutes, and then flipping it, and then having the ooh and the ah.
Wow.
Doing that for the St. Louis Cardinals at their off-season fan convention at Winter Warm-Up. This happens every January. I did that back in 2018, and I told them that I wanted to do it even before I knew how to do it. Because I'd done work for them before and helped them raise a lot of money, and they had trusted me, and they were like, well, what do you want to do this upcoming year? And I said, I want to do a speed painting. And they're like, okay, cool, let's do it. And I was like, oh crap, now I got to figure out how to do a speed painting. I had no idea. It was throwing, so it's like, man, there's a fine line between bold and stupid. And that I spent my Christmas break. I committed to this like in October, but I didn't even rehearse because they were like, "Oh, can we see like maybe some example of what you've done?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll get to it. Sorry, I just haven't been able to because of weather or whatever." It's like I hadn't done it at all. I was procrastinating, and it was the week before I taught myself how to do an upside down portrait speed painting of Stan Musial. And I did it at the event, and it was a huge hit, and it helped them raise a lot of money. And it was, people still to this day, they come up to me and they say, "You did that upside down Stan Musial piece." I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And, I didn't know how to do it until like 10 days before the event. So, and I was very proud of myself after that. So I think, there's something about, I'm pretty sure that I've stolen this from Brene Brown, but, courage is doing something and not knowing the outcome, not knowing what the result will be. And yeah, there was a lot of risk that was involved in that. And that, I could have totally failed on stage, or I could have had to go to the Cardinals and say, "I'm sorry, I can't do this," even though I told you I was going to. But I didn't. And and I was very, very proud of myself in that moment.
That is a huge highlight. And just to recap it, because there's so much there that I'm amazed by, that you promised the Cardinals you were going to speed paint for them before you even knew how to speed paint. And then you painted someone upside down and flipped it over and surprised them.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. That blows my mind. That is a highlight and definitely something to be proud of.
Thank you. Yeah,
yes.
I painted myself into a corner, so to speak. So
I love it. So how do you approach your color palette and starting a piece? How much of it do you plan? How much of the painting dictates to you what it's asking for? What does that look like for you, Steven?
That has been something that I've only recently started to figure that part of it out. The values came first, and then the color palette came next. And it's funny because when I very first started going down this path, I was dating an art professor, and we had these great conversations about. I wasn't in class, this is like 5 years ago, but this was, and she talked about me defining what my palette would be, and I thought that was so weird. And I'm like, "What do you mean defining your palette? You've got all the colors in the world." And I didn't realize that there would be colors that I would glom onto, and there are some that I would reject and just have a distaste for. I know Axel has talked about having discomfort with green before, and Axel Martinez, I believe.
Yes. He's a mentor in Bold School and has been on the podcast as well.
And he's my number one hype man.
I believe episode 4, if my memory is serving me.
Great episode, great guy. I love his energy. Love you, Axel. But he mentioned that, and that I was like, yeah, it's like I typically steer clear of green. But then someone talked about the color harmony wheel, which is a really interesting device that it helps you define what your dominant colors will be, what your complements will be, and then what your accents will be. And I've started to play around with that. I still fight against it. The one time that I gave into it, I thought it turned out to be an absolutely fantastic piece that I was very proud of, because it used a lot of green and a color that I had a lot of discomfort with, and I loved how it turned out. But trying to use more of that in the future. And again, the surprising thing to me is how much I have tried to roadmap out things that I thought art only had to be intuitive. And if you tried to put a language around it, or if you tried to define it, put a vocabulary around it, by demystifying it, it would make it not special, or it would make the art suck or prosaic or whatever. But it's been the opposite. It's like, trying all the ingredients in a kitchen, and then you learn, which ones that you do gravitate towards, but then to learn how to, or not even in that. I think there's something about learning more about cooking science if we go with that path. It's all to say that the more that I've learned, the more that it has knocked down those insecurities, which really that's what that resistance is about. It's about an insecurity of it's also that fear of failing, of like, if I use this, I'm going to screw it up, or I'm going to mess it up. And I know that's certainly what's informed that.
I've heard so many good things. You said a little bit earlier, you said, if even if you fall down 50 times, as long as you get back up. And then just now you said the resistance is about insecurity and the fear of failing. That's so much good food for thought, just because we all, as artists, we have resistance come against us, and reasons why it's so hard to get a painting out, or it's so hard to sometimes just be there as an artist. We have feelings like, do I belong here? Is this important? Do I have value here? And it's even something Charla and I were talking about earlier today. We were recording a podcast and talking about the value inside of an artist, bringing that their self-worth comes out as they produce art and then even monetize the art.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that in what you're saying, where you're saying that resistance has something to do with that. It has to do with your insecurities, and when we begin to overcome that, things get easier. Where we kind of rise above all of that resistance into a new space.
I think there's something about embracing those moments too, and that's interesting, like, to be aware of it. Like, there's nothing wrong with having insecurities or resistance. I think those are that's great if that's happening. If you're not having those moments and you're coasting along, that's like where I was pre-Charla, in that I had gotten into a comfort groove that I had stayed in for so long, it became a rut. And when that resistance comes along, be mindful of it, be intentional. Like, sit it in a corner and be like, hey, I know you're not here to hurt me, but let's really unpack this and see what's going on. Why am I resistant to this? What is that about? What is this fear that's going on? What am I afraid is going to happen? What's the worst that can happen? Start pulling at those threads and embracing that. Like, I love it when I surprise myself with either, like, if a fear comes up, or any time that something new comes up. I mean, that is I don't know, there's just something that's exciting about that. Like, oh, I didn't know that was there. It's like, because I think that's an indicator of depth and complexity, right? And it's the people that aren't willing to explore those nooks and crannies of themselves that, those are the ones that are not as interesting.
Yes, I have learned that about being an artist, is it's definitely a lot of self-reflection, a lot of what you just said, searching the nooks and crannies of yourself, understanding all that's in there, and then bringing it out for the world to see. And that's such a beautiful part of the process. And that piece of final work, even the ones I'm seeing behind you here, the ones on YouTube can see it behind you, some of your pieces, that isn't, those pieces aren't just, a painting you happen to do. They're an accumulation of life experiences that come out through your brush and your paint. And that's something I think the world doesn't understand about art and artists, is that there's just so much inside that comes out. All of life experiences come out through our art. So in the beginning of the podcast, when you shared with me about using your work to raise funds in charity, one of the things you said that really stood out to me was your desire to help other people. And I've heard that as a continual thread through your conversation of just your desire as a person, as a human being, to help another human being, and that your art is this bridge. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, about what it really means to you as an individual, Steven, to be making a difference? Where does that come from in your life?
Existential crisis. It's a thing that sent me into therapy, to go to personal therapy. It was when this was, probably about 15 years ago, when I got a corporate job that was paying incredibly well, and I realized I was making great money, and I was able to get all the toys that I wanted, but at the end of the day I was like, is this really what it's all about? Is this going to be my holding pattern for the rest of my life? Because something was missing. And that thing to me was purpose and meaning, and that it was only being purposeful for me, and that because it was helping me get more stuff, and how could I help other people? That was the thing that I unlocked in going through my own therapy and realizing that I wanted to help other people, which is the thing that, made me decide to become a therapist. And then when I realized that, if I'm going to be an artist, how can I help other people? And also before that, before I went corporate, I was a teacher. I taught English at the college level and writing. But I loved, working with people and helping them understand things. And, that to me gave me meaning. It's that I don't know what the purpose of life is. I know what mine is that to leave the earth a better place than when I came into it, to help other people. And, it's not just about me. I have to do something to serve something that's bigger than me, that exists outside of me. And to me, that is helping others. And without that, that was a big struggle for me in 2020 when all events shut down, all my charity events. I mean, we had some virtual things, but it wasn't the same, and it plummeted dramatically. And not being able to help other people, that was a real bear to deal with, and a real grind on my own mental health, and really sent me inward. And so rather than helping other people in 2020 by taking this class, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to help myself. And I,
which in turn has ripple effect helped other people.
Right.
And so today, in a way of helping, is there a tip or a word of encouragement that you'd like to give to artists listening who may be looking at your work thinking, I want to paint like Steven. How did he get there? Am I ever going to get there? What would you say to that artist who's just that step behind you, who's, persevering to make it?
Give yourself permission to suck. Because sucking at something is the first step to being pretty good at something. Giving yourself permission to fail, embracing that, and that knowing that that's a part of the process. And to think, if you do fail, or if a piece doesn't turn out in the way that you wanted to, that's something I hear a lot of artists struggle with, is that they envision what a piece is going to look like, and they're so disappointed with the reality versus their own expectation. And also, one of my favorite sayings is that don't get caught up in comparing yourself to other artists. There will always be somebody who's better than you at art. Comparison is a thief of joy. Looking at Facebook and comparing your art to other people, comparing your life to other people, like, I don't have the house I want, I don't have the car that I want, I don't have the partner that I want, whatever it is. Man, don't do that. Take moments to look back and be grateful and think about the things that you have, and think back to the time when you didn't have those things, when you were that person that was like, man, what that person that you were in the past, what they would give to be who you are now. And I guarantee you'll find a lot of things. And that's, where gratitude journaling comes in, and taking time to figure out what are the things that I'm grateful for. And that often helps pull me and others out of a rut.
I love that advice. Thank you so much. And we've really enjoyed having you on the show, Steven.
Thank you. I love being on here. I could go for another hour, but I know you got things to do.
I know we could all talk about art all day, and it's really such an amazing opportunity at the Bold Artist Podcast to be able to give artists voices and allow us to talk about art, talk about what we love, and be encouraging each other in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing all your insight and your journey. And we wish you all the best with your artwork and all that's ahead of you, Steven.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching and listening, everyone. I just want to remind you that we are also on Instagram at Bold Artist Podcast. You can just hop on over to Instagram and join in the conversation there. Leave a comment, ask the artist a question. You can even leave us topic ideas. We'd love to hear from you. So at Bold Artist Podcast on Instagram. And until next episode, keep creating.